Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes. Welcome to Everything Cooperative. This morning, this beautiful Thursday morning in Washington, D.C., we are on Capitol Hill with the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy. These are worker cooperatives. They're having their conference starting today on Capitol Hill, and then on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there will be in Baltimore, Maryland. We have in our presence Ricardo Nunez, Judith Turner, and Maria Williford. Maria. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. So let's start off with Ricardo. Ricardo, what are you involved in terms of worker cooperatives, and what brought you to worker cooperatives?
Thanks. So what am I involved in? I'm here representing two different organizations. One is the host of the conference, the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy, the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. And I'm on the board. I'm the board president. And we are actually a member-elected board. The U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives is the only grassroots membership-based organization in the United States representing worker cooperatives, democratic workplaces, and co-op developers. And, we're actually at the conference. We're going to be holding our elections for at-large board members, and then hopefully I'll be still on the board after that. I will be on the board after that. I'm going to be up for election next year. But I'm also here representing the Sustainable Economies Law Center, and we're based in Oakland, California, but we work nationally. And we are a nonprofit law center that provides research, education, advice, and advocacy for just and resilient economies. So not only around worker cooperatives, but also creating healthy, just local food systems, doing work around energy democracy, and also how can we create sustainable spaces and livelihoods for our communities.
So you're an attorney?
I am actually a legal apprentice. So in California, it's one of the last states. There's about 4 states where you don't have to go to law school at all to become an attorney. So I have a supervising attorney who I am an apprentice under, and I'll be taking the bar next year. And we've we've already had 3 folks on staff who have become attorneys this way, and we're spreading the good word across California and across the United States that there's alternatives to going $150,000 into debt if you want to do community-based legal work.
Fantastic. Thanks for being on the show with me today. And we're going to turn to Judith Turner with the same question. How did you what are you doing here, and where are you from?
Let's see, I'm from St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm representing Florida Cooperative Empowered Economic Development, which is a mouthful, so we refer to it as Florida SEED. We are a cooperative business development center, and we are here presenting on a youth co-op that we organized and formed.
What does a youth co-op do?
That is any business that is owned and operated by youth under the age of 18. So in the state of Florida, we don't have a statute limiting how old you can be to own a business. So we are taking advantage of that and implementing youth co-ops wherever we can find the support to do so.
Fantastic.
And we're working from a model based out of Puerto Rico, which is La Liga de Cooperativa. So they have youth co-ops in every single school in Puerto Rico, and we're taking their curriculum and their concept and bringing it to Florida.
It's fantastic. Thank you. So I want to hear more about that. And you're presenting at the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy this weekend.
Yes, we are. We're presenting on the story of how we did it. I met someone at an ACE conference, which is Association of Cooperative Educators, 2 years ago. I met a presenter at La Liga who ended up, we started to build a bridge, and we're going to tell the story of how we built that bridge and put that program in Florida.
Good. I want to be there because I like the idea of having these co-ops in high school.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Many good reasons for that.
And Maria Williford, what about you? How did you come here, and what are you doing?
Yeah, well, I'm here representing Root Volume Cooperative. We're a ecological landscape design and construction company based out of Oakland. We started back in 2017. I'm one of the co-founders of the company, and we have grown with the support of the Arizmendi Association of Cooperatives, which is one of the more successful developers out on the West Coast. They've done 6 bakeries so far, and our
Six
company,
bakeries?
6 bakery worker-owned bakeries.
Okay.
And my company is the first venture into businesses outside of bakeries.
So baking and landscaping. Okay.
And construction as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys for being here this morning. I am looking forward to this conversation and the conference in Baltimore this weekend. So let me just start off by talking about there's 4 basic types of co-ops for everybody out there. If the co-op is owned and controlled by the employees, it's called a worker co-op, and that's what we're talking about mostly here today. But so any business you can think of, whether it's bakeries or construction or landscape design or anything, IBM, they all could be a worker-owned co-op if the workers owned and controlled the business. And then if the business is controlled by the people that buy the services or use the products of the services, is called a consumer cooperative. And most people don't know that credit unions are a consumer cooperative. They're owned by the people that deposit their monies and have checking accounts. Housing co-ops are another example of consumer co-ops. And there is a health clinic in Madison, Wisconsin that's owned and controlled by the patients. And that's a consumer cooperative. So now you go to what I normally think about farmers. Farmers grow stuff. And so they have to buy things in order to grow whatever they're growing. And so they get together and they do purchasing co-ops. So they can buy in volume and get a better quality product, and they can form a business whose the people in that business are only looking to buy these products. So they become experts that the farmers perhaps could not become experts in getting quality and better contracts and so forth. And now I'm beginning to see more artists using this form, this purchasing co-ops. They may buy a building together where they can practice if they're musicians, where they couldn't do by themselves. And there's a artist worker cooperative in Pittsburgh where people come together. They are artists and they can produce their things together. And they can, the other side of that is a marketing co-op where, again, farmers, artists, and other people come together to market their products in locations they couldn't do as individual farmers or individual artists. Like this place in Pittsburgh, they have a storefront where these ladies come together with whatever they produce, whether it's a clothes or jewelry or wood carvings or whatever they may produce, and they have a storefront that individual artists could not afford that rent. But coming together, they can do this, and they produce it. Ocean Spray, Land O'Lakes,
Organic Valley,
Sunkist, Organic Valley, these are all producer or marketing co-ops. Those are the 2 names that they normally come in. So those are the 4 types, and today we're focused on those businesses that are owned and controlled by the employees, worker co-ops. So who would like to start off talking about your worker co-ops, or whether it's a youth co-op or... No, before that, how did you get involved in co-ops? What's your history? Who wants to start that one first?
Yeah, I'll start.
Okay. Thank you, Ricardo.
Yeah, of course. I got into cooperatives when I actually I joined the Peace Corps, and I was in Zambia for 2.5 years, and I was supposed to be doing rural education development, so teacher training, teacher monitoring. When I got to the village, I was being introduced, and I said, I'm supposed to be here to do teacher training, but I want to be here to serve the community, so what do you want me to do with you? And a group of women stood up and said, we want to start a women's cooperative. And I said, great, I'll help you start that. And I don't know what that is.
You didn't say, what is it?
So over the next 2.5 years, I saw the transformation of these women's lives through cooperative economics and cooperative organizing, and just saw that previously they didn't have any power of purse at home. The men always controlled the money, so now they were able to spend the money on things for household goods, on their children's education. They were able to actually, through coming together to run these businesses, because they would start these micro enterprises, they actually started to have a collective voice to have basically political pressure in their communities to advocate for themselves in village politics. And so over 2.5 years, I saw the power of cooperatives. And when I came back to the States, I was looking for spaces to build worker power and found my way into the worker co-op scene in Los Angeles, and then went up to the Bay Area to join the Sustainable Economies Law Center. So that's sort of a capsule summary.
So you saw people change their whole lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, in their position in the community.
That's right. Yeah.
Did you ever know how they knew about worker co-ops? Did the women wanted to start one? How did they learn about it?
In Zambia and a lot of other countries outside of the United States, cooperatives are seen as a force for economic development, and so they're supported by the government. So the women really found out about cooperatives because the government provided incentives, financial incentives, as well as other types of incentives for cooperatives to get started. So once you became an official women's cooperative in Zambia, then you'd be eligible for subsidized fertilizer. These were all subsistence farmers, so they were able to access the subsidized fertilizer. They also had conferences, so these people who would literally not leave a few miles radius from where they lived were now able to travel around the country and join with other women to talk about cooperatives and empowerment for themselves and their communities. So it was really government support and just a general sense of in the communities that cooperatives were a thing that they should organize around if they wanted to change their lives.
So did you ever use the fifth principle of co-ops? I mean, that's education, training, and information.
Oh, yeah.
Because you went over there about education. Mm-hmm. So you learned about co-ops. Could you come back and circle around with the education piece?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's a lot of what we did there was training and education for the women's cooperatives on like how to manage their bookkeeping and accounting and run their meetings and those types of things. And I was learning as much from them as I was
and that happens when you're teaching.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then when I came back to the States, I tried to bring it back here, those lessons that I learned.
So that reminds me of Dame Pauline Green was the president of International Cooperative Alliance. That's the large international co-op group. And she said that co-ops help people come out of poverty with dignity. Mm-hmm. And that's what I heard you talking about, that they're subsistence farmers. They didn't have a lot of money and very little say-so being women in a village in Zambia. Mm-hmm. And so they were able to get a lot of control through this cooperative model.
That's right.
So let's go to Judith. How did you get involved in this?
Oh, well, I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. I'm a licensed building contractor, and I have set up shop around the country. I set up a business in New York City, San Francisco, Colorado, and I finally landed in Florida. So I've had my own contracting firm.
How did you do that at 30 years old?
Well, I had an art degree and I couldn't type, and I was in New York, and it just made sense to everyone for me to become a contractor.
Okay.
I'm originally from Wisconsin. Everybody thought I had a trusting face, and they gave me their keys. And before you know it, my subs helped train me to a great extent. Although I'm certified in building, but they helped me learn their trades as well. So I had a good comprehensive understanding. Much the way Ricardo is getting his education, it was through the help of others. So in a way, running a construction firm is a lot like running a cooperative. We're all in business for ourselves. Getting 5 or 6 disagreeable males to do what you need them to do is quite a talent. But I had lots of experience. But anyway,
we're going to take our first break. We'll be right back, and we'll finish your story. I'm really interested in hearing it. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial. Information is power. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Cooperative. And WL makes a great partner because information is power. But I found out it isn't information. Information is kind of like stored power. You can get the information, but if you don't put it to use, putting it to use is where you get the power. So on this program, we're giving you information about co-ops. And right now we're talking about worker co-ops, so that you may want to start your own co-op. You may want to get together with 3, 4, 5, 6 of your friends or co-workers and start your own business. They're normally created to solve some community problem. One person said early on in the program that co-ops are to solve community problems. If you don't have a community problem, there's no need for a co-op. And so right before break, Judith Turner from St. Petersburg, Florida, through all aspects of the United States, he's traveled around, was telling us how she got into co-op. So I'd like to hear that story.
Okay, so to continue, I'd spent many years in Florida then building my business, and as I was finding success, I was really interested because I was working more in the office at this point, and I had employees rather than working directly with subcontractors. So I was really interested in how this could be a cooperative and how to get people invested in the work as much as I was. And I thought, well, I paid them more, I gave them the schedules they want, but it really didn't seem to get their real true investment. And I wanted to learn more about worker co-ops, but I couldn't find any information. I started listening to Dr. Richard Wolff on YouTube and followed his site. And from there, I was able to find more and more resources. And Ricardo's organization was one of them. But I started reading. And when you find yourself up at 3 a.m. reading IRS case law and the efficiency of worker co-ops, you know you have fallen off the cliff. And I attended a developer training with Cooperation Works, and it was the first leg of training. And when I came back, I had been talking a lot around town and had been going to a lot of community organizations. And there was one group that did a survey, and they had 1,400 surveys of people asking for a grocery co-op, a community-owned grocery co-op. And politicians were calling me, asking me about co-ops. So I thought, well, there's a real chance to establish something in this town. If you love co-ops, this could be a good place to be.
There was a need.
There was an absolute need. So I decided to establish the development center. I thought about converting the construction company to a worker-owned, but I thought at this stage of my career I could do more to establish a development center and help other people grow lots of different types of cooperatives.
So you went from constructing buildings to constructing businesses.
I say, yeah, I want to build co-ops. I'm not interested in building buildings. People are always asking me, build my house. I'm like, no, I'll build you a co-op. I'm not doing it.
All right. Thank you so much. Maria, how did you get into co-ops?
Yeah, similarly to Ricardo, my starting co-op started abroad. I was living and working on a permaculture farm in Nicaragua.
What kind of farm?
Permaculture. It's a type of ecological design methodology that's really about enhancing the beneficial aspects of relationships, of how systems interrelate. And so I was in a design intensive at that time. And I just fell into a design and construction project that was happening in the community center there and helped to build a structure for one of the first women's sewing cooperatives in that town. And much like in the village that Ricardo was at in Zambia, the women were very much underemployed. The island had about a 90% unemployment rate for the women there. And so having something like that was a pretty big deal. And even the community director ended up saying that building was the nicest building in Balgway when we were done with it. Very heavy on the brick. So yeah. And when I came back, I just started looking for any opportunity to connect design and construction and cooperatives together, and ended up working as a business manager for a general contracting firm in Oakland. That's a 10-year-old co-op called Dig Cooperative. They specialize in decentralized water systems, so gray water and rainwater. And then from that, I went into Landscape Cooperative. At the time, they weren't a cooperative, and so I actually helped them with the conversion to a co-op. And then just from that point, I decided I wanted to start my own business, and so started Root Volume in 2017.
So you started the cooperative Root Volume?
I did.
You and others, or just?
Yeah, it was me and two founders.
Okay.
We started together. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what year were you in Nicaragua?
That was 2012.
So was there a lot of crime there then? That's all I hear about.
Oh, there was definitely some turmoil happening in Managua, which is the capital. I was on Ometepe Island at the time, and there were some political issues there with, they were trying to build an airport, right through some people's homes at the time. So there was some, resistance going on.
So I was just wondering, how did this co-op with these women that had 90% unemployment, how did that affect crime, or, did people overcome this kind of issue there with this business?
I think It's sad to say that it's still a persistent issue there. It's women, like in many countries, not just developing countries, are typically very economically suppressed, and also in educational opportunities as well. And this co-op, from my understanding, is still continuing, but is still pretty small comparatively to the issues. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I would like to get more into, I particularly want to go back to Judith, so you can talk to us about that youth co-op that you have to start, and you're going to be talking about this weekend in Baltimore at the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy.
Yes.
So what is that youth co-op?
So do you want to start with how it evolved, or what it is in general?
What it is in general, and then how it evolved.
Okay, so in general, a youth co-op is just a cooperatively owned business by youth under the age of 18, or it could be up to 28, depending on how you want to define youth. And a youth co-op is typically fostered by a public institution, so you have a safe space, and it is, and so the youth don't have to pay rent. They have the opportunity, they can give back to the institution a percentage of their profits, but they're not under the pressure of paying rent. And they also have a developer and an adult supervisor. But the youth actually own the business, run the business, and get the benefit of learning how to run a business.
And if there's money, they get some profit.
Oh, usually there's money, lots of profit. Believe it or not, everybody wants to help the kids. And we tell our kids now, take advantage of this. Put youth in your name, because we have some billionaire restaurant owners lining up to give the kids contracts. I say, but as soon as you're 18, they're going to tell you to go do it yourself. But, many people want to help youth, and it's easy for them to use that in a business.
To get business.
Yeah, to get business. And so
how did it get started?
So 2 years ago, I attended the Association of Cooperative Educators Conference, and there La Liga de Cooperativa of Puerto Rico was there presenting. And, being in construction, which is heavily occupied by Latinos, they're a part of my mainstream everyday life, and it made perfect sense to me to connect with that organization and one of the presenters. So he had indicated that the organization had always kind of was interested in building a bridge to Florida. So La Liga is an organization, they have a law there that every high school has to have a youth co-op. And some of these kids, they have stores, their sales are like $700 to $1,000 a day. So that just told me this is not some kind of after-school daycare program. These kids are really running businesses. They know what they're doing. And they showed 3rd through 5th graders, running businesses. And I thought, this makes sense to me. I was building a baby.
What kind of businesses?
Well, they actually grow a plant, and they infuse it with oil, and then they design their label, and they put it on a little bottle, and they go out and sell it for a quarter or 50 cents at fairs, and their table will sell out in an hour because everyone wants to help the kids, and they got a good product, and it's affordable. So it made perfect sense to me to see this program, and I felt like I have to do this. I just have to find a way to bring a youth co-op to Florida, because we're housed at Pinellas Technical College, which is still under school board control. So I thought, well, under my roof, there's got to be an open door to get into the school system somehow, some way. But that's not really where our story started. That's not where our first co-op started.
Before we get to that, I lived 5 years in Puerto Rico, and I found out about co-ops because I managed housing co-ops here in Washington, D.C. So that's how I learned about co-ops. I didn't learn about them in my formal education or anything like that. But in Puerto Rico, the National Association of Housing Co-ops had our annual meeting in Puerto Rico one year. We had the cabinet. There was a cabinet member of the governor on co-ops, and he came and he said something like 75% of the people in Puerto Rico were in 5 co-ops. They belong to 5 co-ops. And I kind of thought that might be why when I lived in Puerto Rico, come election day, it was amazing. I thought there was like a mob outside. They had big horns, and around election, I think they had like 82% of the people would vote compared to like 42 or something here. So their democracy, and I've always wondered when I found out about this, I wonder if it's because of the co-op influence. When you talk about the politics of what you had talked about it, Ricardo, you talked about the politics in Zambia and how people got into politics, and they begin to understand what democracy is and how important the vote is. Okay. So now we want to go over to Maria. and talk about, you said it was 3 people that started Root Co-op?
Yeah, Root Volume. It's 3 people. Yeah.
And so how did you get started, and what are you doing, and how's your business now?
Yeah, we're doing great. We ended up actually losing a founder, but it was very amicable. And we ended up with 2 founders, and we have 2 other people that are member owners right now, and 1 new candidate that has just started with us.
So it's 5 now?
It's 5 now, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we have projects lined up through the new year, which is really great. We're doing work that's really fun and exciting, and we have clients that have just really found us through word of mouth, and that's always the best way to go. A lot of we actually incorporated with the support of Arizmendi. Yep.
We're going to come right back and find out about that support and how is it going, and we're going to take our second break, and we'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial. Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Cooperative, where we give you information about co-ops, how they get started, what the benefits of them, and hopefully you'll take this information, either start a co-op or go out and find one. Like Recreation Equipment has put a superstore in D.C. It's a consumer cooperative to get recreational equipment. And before the break, we were talking to Maria Williford from Root Volume Cooperative out of Oakland, California, who's here this weekend for the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy, which is they're on the Hill this morning, and that's where we're taping from. And on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they're in Baltimore, Maryland. And we'll talk more about that conference later on. But Maria was talking about how they got started. Now they have 5 members of their worker cooperative. So you want to continue telling us about your co-op?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to say that, in the co-op community, there's often a lot of support that is given, and especially me not coming from a design background. I started in business. I had a lot of training to do to get into the field that I am. And one of the first trainings that I took was actually with the Sustainable Economy Law Center, and that's how Ricardo and I initially met, was at that time in 2015. So I learned a lot of what I know about co-ops from him.
Okay.
But Arizmendi is our most recent supporter. We're part of the Arizmendi Association of Cooperatives. They are now 6 bakeries throughout the Bay Area. And
now what? 6 bakeries.
6 bakeries throughout the Bay Area. And they recently ventured out into helping to develop other businesses. And they do that through a number of ways, through legal support, operational support, as well as financial support as well. Oftentimes they'll help start bakeries by taking the lease out for the building, getting the equipment, running the hiring for the initial worker owners of that bakery. And so they start with the seed funding as well as the training of all the people that are starting the business to really try to set them up for success.
I wonder if they've ever thought about or looked at starting a bakery, a worker cooperative, or expanding it into prisons. Because in Italy, they have a bakery, a worker cooperative that's both in the prisons and outside. So when the prisoners leave the prisons, they had only 5% returning versus something like, 70% returning here in the U.S. Because when they leave, they have a family already there. Mm-hmm. They have a community, a business that they're already able to work in, so they can make money. Mm-hmm. They know how to do the business, and they feel a part of this community. So there's no reason to go back, and they can go out and work and make money. So when you say 6 bakeries, I'm going, that would be great, because they can do the baking in the prison, both for the prison and for people on the outside. So anyway, maybe
that would be such a great idea. I haven't heard them talk about that, but it wouldn't be an unusual model in the Bay Area anyways. There's another co-op called Planting Justice, and they help to do training for workers, landscape work for prisoners at San Quentin, and they help them with transition into working on gardens outside once they're out. So
yeah, that would be perfect to do.
That'd be awesome.
And maybe there's somebody in the prison that could be a part of your co-op.
Absolutely. We'd love it. We'd welcome the opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's go back to Mr. Ricardo. What are some of the kinds of businesses that you've been helping to get started?
Yeah, so we at the Law Center provide a few different resources. One, which Maria mentioned, was the Worker Co-op Academy, which was a business boot camp about 3.5 months long that provided training and education on many different parts of cooperative businesses, healthy communication, because when you're in a cooperative and you're all co-owners, you're going to have to be able to communicate well, resolve conflicts. I think like in our existing society, we're not trained that way. It's like my way or the highway.
Bring that to D.C. That's why you're on the Hill today, right?
That's right. We're here on D.C., which I want to get into later too, the policy things that we're moving forward. But with the actual businesses that we've been supporting, we actually provide what we call the Resilient Communities Legal Cafe. We hold it at coffee shops, at community spaces, at cooperatives, where it's first come, first served legal advice to start nonprofits, social enterprises, cooperatives, and we've served over 1,300 in the last 6 years. So in the Bay Area, and we've just started doing them virtually. So if folks are listening to this podcast who are based in California or starting a business in California, because that's where we're licensed to provide legal advice, they can sign up on our website, thesilk.org. And so
there's a group here in D.C. at the University of District of Columbia, the Clark School of Law, and they have a clinic. They've been helping housing co-ops is the way I know them. But I would bet Louise Howell there, an attorney, would be very interested in something like this.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to hook you guys up.
Yeah, and we're actually, we have a website called cooplaw.org, which is a national resource website for cooperatives. It's primarily focused on worker cooperatives, and we're actually creating state-by-state guides so that when somebody in Texas or somebody in Maryland or someone in D.C. wants to start a cooperative, they can go to cooplaw.org, find their state page, and see what's the different ways that people have incorporated as a cooperative in that state, what are some sample bylaws or operating agreements, how have you navigated employment law or securities law in that state, because all of these legal issues of starting a business, running a business, capitalizing a business are all very tricky, and the law has not made it easy for regular people to navigate it. The law has been created to facilitate large companies to pay really expensive attorneys to navigate it, and everyone else just has to figure it out and really, stumble through it. So we're trying to create those resources for community-based entrepreneurs to
cooplaw.org.
Yep, cooplaw.org.
Neat.
Yeah, and so some of the cooperatives that we're really excited about that we've helped incubate, one, the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, which is a multi-stakeholder cooperative. So you were talking about the different types of cooperatives, producer, worker, marketing, consumer. We actually created a cooperative where there's a worker collective, which has a membership class of their voting members of the cooperative. There's also consumer members, so the residents of the properties that are being bought by the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. And then we also have investors, so anyone in California can invest up to $1,000 to help capitalize the cooperative to purchase properties and basically take them off the speculative market.
So are these investors, are they members and can vote also?
Yeah, they have they're members and they can vote. And another thing about this cooperative, it's not only multi-stakeholders for the members. We've actually created a board structure that mandates that 3 of the 7 board seats are voted on by particular community stakeholders. So we have one board seat who is elected by we have
for the worker collective and one by the consumer.
Yeah, those are the member classes. They all get a vote on boards, but we also have 3 board seats that are for, basically it's a movement cooperative, so tied to different movements in different communities. So there's one specifically that is representing the black community. So in Oakland, we've had, I believe, 70% of the black population of Oakland be displaced over the last 10 to 15 years because of gentrification. So we want to make sure that there's representation from the black community on the board, talking to the board to really set the direction of the cooperative to make sure that we're not exacerbating this gentrification and displacement that's happening in the East Bay. So we're actually trying to figure out different governance structures to incorporate not only the members but other community stakeholders as well. And that's a lot of the work that the Law Center does, is trying to figure out how do we navigate the law and create these long-term institutions for long-term transformation.
That's phenomenal. I mean, I've heard of food co-ops being both worker co-ops and consumer co-ops, a mixture, but I've never heard of the third, the investor piece. That would be interesting to look at more of that. Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, so that's one.
So that's one. Yeah, we have a People Power Solar Cooperative, which is similar model and structure. We incubated them at the same time, but this one also has a worker collective that is running the cooperative and sort of being the backbone of the organization. And they install solar arrays on community level. Like apartment buildings and schools and those types of things as well. So those are two examples. And then some of the other exciting things that we're working on are conversions. So right now there's this thing called the silver tsunami, where you have baby boomers who are nearing retirement age, and only about 7 to 12% of business owners have a succession plan. So that means about 85 to 93% of business owners who are baby boomers actually don't have a plan. And so what typically happens to a business is it will close or it'll sell to the highest bidder. And many times the highest bidder just wants the customer sheet, or they just want the assets of the company, and then they close it down. And so what we're really advocating for here today on Capitol Hill, as well as work that we're doing around the country, is to find ways to support outreach, education, and training to existing business owners to sell to their employees, so that the businesses can become employee-owned worker co-ops, stay rooted in the community, and keep that community culture. And really just it's a win-win for everyone. So that's another big part of our work right now that's exciting.
Do you have any sense of, in this silver tsunami, which I'm a part of, how many businesses, small businesses, are owned by this group of people?
Millions. I know. There's just one statistic I have in front of me right now, which is what was it? Oh, that 2.3 million companies employing 1 in 6 workers nationwide, or close to 25 million people across the country, or about 42,000 businesses. That's the number of businesses that are right now ready for either sale or closure, or getting ready to figure out what to do when the owners retire.
So I have heard these numbers at the Cincinnati Union Cooperative Initiative. Mm-hmm. So in Cincinnati, it's coming up. They have every 2 years. Sometime in November, they're having their conference, and I heard those numbers there. Yep. About the first time I heard the silver tsunami, and the whole idea is to get conversions happening so the employees can take over the business. They stay in the community, the money stays in the community, or if it had gone out before, now is in the community, and build this community. And it's the first time I really understand this multiplier effect. If money stays in the community, talk about that in particular African American communities, it would be one time. Yep. Make the money and then go outside the community and spend it. Where when folks are in the community, then they spend the money in the community, whether it's going to the grocery store or going to get their hair done, hair did, whatever the case may be. Then that money turns over, and then it just builds the economic wealth of the whole community. Yeah, and this is what co-ops do.
Yeah, it's like a pinball game. Like if it's an outside company, then you shoot the ball once and it goes into the hole, and that's it. But if it's a locally owned business, it's like a pinball machine where the ball is just going. It just stays in there and it's hitting all the points. And,
got it.
Yeah, just kind of moving around and creating community wealth.
Phenomenal. What I wanted to go back to Arizmendi. You mentioned that name. What is that name? How did that name come about? Do you know?
Yeah, I do. It was, I really should know this story about, like, the father that
If you want to pass it over.
I would love to.
Pass it over.
Go right ahead.
Okay, Ricardo.
Yeah.
You have a minute.
Okay. Father Arizmendi was a father in the Basque region of Spain during the Franco dictatorship and started a school for entrepreneurs. He was really trying to find ways to start to bring the Catholic social justice teaching into practice, and so helped start a worker cooperative that eventually became the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation, which has over 500 companies. There's 73,000 worker owners, and it's really a model that a lot of people around the world are inspired by. And Arizmendi Association in the Bay Area, the bakeries, was one of the groups that were inspired by Father Arizmendi, and helped start these bakeries, so that Maria is now a part of.
So I have a picture of him riding his bicycle in this little town, and
Yes.
there was 90% unemployment of some high number after this war, and it was and it was in a dirt road, and now they have their own bank, they have their own college, they have their own schools, they have all of this. And during this last downturn, nobody was laid off. Even though a company went out of business, the other companies hired the employees, and people took breaks. They took 10% salary reduction so that everybody could stay employed. That's why co-ops work so well and why I love them, and we're going to take our final break, and we'll be right back.
$14.50 WOL.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Cooperative. This program is being brought to you by the National Cooperative Bank. NCB mission is to support and be an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, especially in low-income communities, by providing innovative financial and related services. And they've been doing this since the 80s. They've been doing a great job of it. When you start talking about low-income communities, that's where you find a lot of black and brown folks, not with 90% unemployment, as Maria found in Nicaragua or in the tribes of Zambia, and when they go out in the tribes and the villages with huge unemployment, particularly for women. But there's higher unemployment in black and brown communities. And the other big issue is I've seen numbers around like Cincinnati, Cleveland. Inside, in the suburbs of Cleveland, the death rate, how long one expects to live, was 10 times higher than inside Cleveland. So that if you live in certain zip codes, low-income communities, you don't get the health that you need, you don't have the income that you need, you don't have the wealth that you need to get the the health that you need. And so all of this wraps around this sense that people will die early, live a worse life and die early, and co-ops is one of the answers. So, Judith, can you talk about that a bit?
I'd love to talk about that. That's precisely the issue we're dealing with in St. Petersburg, Florida, in South St. Pete. We are a classic tale of two cities. We have a flourishing downtown, and we have food deserts all over the south area where the surveys were taken asking for a grocery store after two big box stores used up their subsidies and closed up shop and left. So that's when people started asking for a co-op. It's been 900 days. So we now have a nutritionist that is talking to us, that works for a local hospital, that has patients that are from this area, and telling us precisely that they are dying younger, they're walking in with heart disease because they don't have access to nutrient-dense food. So, and they don't have the income to even get a car to go outside of the area. We have the lowest car ownership in all of St. Petersburg. So the wealth has just been extracted from this area. And as far as getting back to the multiplier, food co-ops actually have a multiplier that's 24 cents higher than a traditional grocery store. And I've looked at a feasibility study for our area where we want to open our food co-op, which is community-owned, not worker-owned, but that it actually equated to almost $1 million a month leaving our neighborhood. So just if we bring in a food co-op and we build it, we would have an additional $1 million a month floating around, which contributes to everyone's bottom line, and then they can afford to see doctors and they can afford to get health care. But absolutely, the health effect is a big one.
It is huge, and that's why you guys are on the Hill today to talk about some of this. So, Ricardo, what are some of the things that you want to get accomplished, and who do you want to see today?
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of representatives today and their staff. And what we're trying to accomplish today is really, I think, and I've heard you talk about it on past episodes, where one of the biggest hurdles for cooperatives in the United States is that just people don't know they exist. And so one of the things that we're doing is to build awareness around cooperatives and the cooperative model, and specifically worker cooperatives on the Hill today. But this is also a follow-up to really some landmark legislation that passed last year. I believe it was last year. The Main Street Employee Ownership Act, which was the first federal legislation to support democratic employee ownership and actually have the word worker cooperative in any federal legislation in the history of the United States. So that passed last year, and part of it was directing the SBA, the Small Business Administration, to find ways to make lending to worker cooperatives easier. I know that for a lot of businesses, when you go to find a loan, they're going to ask for a personal guarantee. And a personal guarantee is when somebody puts up their own individual personal collateral, like their house or their car or something like that, to get the loan.
And you don't have a lot of wealth in the neighborhood to do that. I got it.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of wealth. And when you're 12, 15, 30 worker owners, not everybody's going to want to do a personal guarantee. So it's finding ways to figure out, how can we protect the lenders, but also how can we meet this model, this worker cooperative model, where it's at. And so right now there's some national legislation that's following up from the Main Street Employee Ownership Act that is called the National Worker Cooperative Development Act. It's being worked on by Ro Khanna, a representative from the South Bay in the San Francisco area. And really it is targeting a lot of the that people don't know about worker cooperatives. So it's looking to create more resources around the country for worker cooperatives. It's looking to release some funding to cooperative development centers. There's already a rural cooperative development grant program that's been running for years, and so we want to model something off of that program towards worker cooperatives. It's also looking to create some more tax incentives, because as we've seen in the past, tax incentives will actually release a lot of floodgates. So when the whole nonprofit industry in the United States can really be tied back to creating more tax exemption, raising the cap on tax exemptions to nonprofits. Mm-hmm. And so with cooperative conversions, we're looking to create some tax incentives for the selling owners to give them some tax incentive to sell from the capital gains taxes.
Well, they have it for ESOPs.
They have it for ESOPs, but some of the restrictions around the 1042 rollover, if we're going to get into the weeds, there's some of the mechanisms and restrictions around the rollover make it difficult for worker cooperative conversions, particularly if you're going to sell if it's an LLC, a limited liability company, or if it's a cooperative corporation or not a C corporation, if it's an S corporation, all of these things. So when you get into the nitty-gritty of the existing rollover, it can be difficult for a lot of companies to get that incentive, that capital gains tax exemption from the sale. So what we're trying to do is broaden it for worker cooperatives, so it's easier for sellers to see that capital gains tax exemption and really incentivize the growth of worker cooperatives around the country. So that's a lot of what we're trying to do today is get the cooperative model in front of legislators, and to let them know that there's this act that's being worked on that they should be in support of, and also that the Congressional Cooperative Business Caucus is being restarted with the help of NCBA CLUSA. And so for representatives to join that as well as that gets started next year to really build awareness and national legislation around cooperatives of all kinds.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is great. Now I need you to tell me, when you get in the weeds, sometimes it gets to be like, I don't know, deer in headlight with the eyes and stuff.
I've done enough legal trainings where at some points I'm like, I lost you.
But it's so absolutely important for it to be clear. If you do this conversion, not only will they buy your business so you'll get some money, you don't have to close it down and people lose their jobs. So you'll get some money, but you can also get this tax incentive for doing it also. That could be the boost that caused this to happen. Okay. Anybody else want to add anything to what you're doing on the Hill? Maria or Judith? Okay. So now let's talk about the conference in Baltimore this weekend. We have a few more minutes left. So what are you doing this weekend in Baltimore, and where can people, if they want to go to this conference, where would they go and how would they do it?
Yeah, sure. The conference happens every other year. So on odd years, we have conferences on the East and West Coast. So this is the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy. We had our Western Worker Co-op Conference a few months ago. And it's a place for really worker owners and developers to come together to share resources, to share stories. We already heard from Judith the story about that she first learned about this model that she's replicating at a conference. And so that's some of what we do. And so
this is principle number 5 of education, training, and information.
Yeah.
And what I like about co-ops, too, I've taught 12 years, and then mostly in the capitalistic model, people hold on to knowledge because of competition. But in the co-op world, and principle 6 is cooperation among co-ops, people give information, share information lovingly and caringly. So that's what I hear you saying happens here at this conference.
Yeah, and that's what's going to happen this weekend, and it's going to be at the Baltimore School, University of Baltimore School of Law. And if folks want to know more about it, they can go to conference.coop and click on the link for the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy and see all the information there. So it'll be a fun weekend, and that's the thing about these worker co-op conferences. They're actually fun. They're like enjoyable spaces. They're meant to be participatory and engaging, and it's really a lot of relationships are built that are quite beautiful.
Thank you, guys. So you can go to conference.coop. I don't have time to ask you if you like what you do, and I got that you love it. But I would like to take the last minute just to give a shout out to Congressman Elijah Cummings. He passed away this morning, early hours, and that's a great loss for the city of Baltimore and our country. He was born and raised in Baltimore, where he resides. He dedicated his life of service, and this is what co-ops do too, of service. And his service was uplifting and empowering the people he was sworn to represent. And I would have liked to have gotten to him to tell him about co-ops if he did not know about them, and I think he would have embraced co-ops. But I like one of his motto is that our children are living messages that we send to a future we will never see. And this is why I like what you're doing, Judith, in schools, that our children are the living message that we send to the future. So you're sending all of these kids with all of these youth co-ops into the future, and we will never see that future that they have. Thank you guys so much for being on. Everybody out there, we will see you next week, and please live cooperatively.
.1450 WOL.